All right, I'm here with my dad, Erny Rangel, and we're here to do part two of my interview with him, where we talk about stories of what he's done in music. And so the last time we finished, you had finished high school. And so what do you remember next, Dad?
Well, I really practiced hard learning my chords during high school in summers. And I played mostly rock and roll at the time in a rock band. And I thought I was doing pretty good, but uh, one of my friends said he got me an audition with some guys that wanted me to play in the club. And so they came down to my dad's house in the basement, and I played a few songs. I only knew like a few rock songs that we did, And they said, "Oh, that's fine. That's great. That's fine." And I was real kind of naive at the time, so I didn't know what was going on. They just told me to be down in Rock Island. There was a strip down there where all the nightclubs used to be on 20th Street.
Where was this located at?
20th Street, Rock Island. And some place called the Blue Horizon, I was supposed to play it. So I didn't know what to expect because there was no rehearsals and I didn't even know these guys, Turned out to be a three-piece band, me on the guitar, a bass player who didn't know how to play bass, and he was trying to sing too, and a drummer. So we played some rock songs, mostly instrumentals that I knew, and they played along. And Friday nights, the gig was from I think it was Wednesday to Saturday, late Saturday, and then a early morning jam session on Sunday morning. And so everything went out fine. Friday, it was really crowded in the club. And my big mistake was I practiced all these chords and everything that I knew or that I was learning, but I didn't know much about progressions except for like rock songs like all popular songs like the Diamonds sang Little Darling, or you go from C to A minor to F to G, stuff like that. Most of the songs I knew only had about 3 or 4 chords. So one of the guys told me that some trumpet player wanted to sit in. So he sat in and he started playing a song called Misty. Well, I heard about Johnny Mathis on the radio, and I knew the tune, but I didn't know the chord progression. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just stick in all these chords that I learned from my Mickey Baker jazz books, methods. And what happens is guys, when they know you ain't cutting it, they just walk off the stage. They take a break, so to speak. Be nice, they take a break.
Yep.
So he took a break. So later on that evening, he was sitting there having a drink and I went over and asked him, frankly, I said, were my chords all right during that song? He says, your chords are great, except that there was no progression. You need to learn the progression of that song. So he was kind of nice and delicate about it. So I went home and started learning the progressions of the songs. And I had a pretty good ear, so I could, when I heard a song I liked on the radio or something like that, I would figure it out because I knew the chords. So at that time, I started getting a little older. Well, at that time, I was only like 19 or 20. I was too young to be in clubs, and I was already playing in clubs. But it was it was a good experience as far as my life experience goes, because I saw a lot of things that, you don't want to teach your kids about. Later on, I think it was during high school, I played a lot of high school dances. And then later on, I got called to do play in the band at Regal Lanes and East Moline. It was me on guitar and a bass player who sang soul songs, and an organ player played a B3 organ, and a drummer, Mike Bright. So I started playing with those guys, and it was mostly stuff like, what's that? Booker T and the MGs, Otis Redding.
Okay, well, let me interrupt you here.
Go ahead.
Because after high school, you graduated what year? 61?
Not between 1960 and 61, yes.
Well, the Macombos started in 62.
No, they started around 61.
Somewhere in there, you were doing some of these nightclubs because Booker T, they weren't a band yet in 61 as far as recording.
No, that kind of music. You know, I remember playing.
So were you in Regal Lanes first, or were you in the Macombos first, is my question.
I think I was in the Macombos first, and then I told my dad, you know, I really want to go play in these clubs because the musical experience for me.
Well, let's start with the Macombos then. How did that get started?
Well, my dad, he had always played in little trios and stuff like that. And one day he told me he wanted to start a band that played good music. And I had no idea what he wanted, what he was after. So he said, he asked me if I knew any percussion players. And I knew my friend Mike Reyes, he played drums and percussion. So he said he's going to give him a call. So it was the first rehearsal was me and Mike on drums. He was on drums. Henry Rangel, I can't remember if it was Henry Rangel or Pete Rangel that played bass. And then my dad on saxophone, Vince Pareto on trumpet, second trumpet, and Gonzalo Lopez on first trumpet. Jesse Hossel was on percussion like congas, and he sang also. And then shortly after, we decided we needed a singer, and it was Gonzalo Lopez who suggested Richard Esparza. He knew he did some singing because they lived up a hill from us, and that's where Gonzalo lived at the time. So we said, let's go get him. And so that Sunday, we used to practice on Sundays. I said, that Sunday, we went outside to the street and go up the hill, and there was Richard carrying up some ice cream cones to go up to his house, his grandma's, her mother-in-law's house. And we asked him about singing, coming over to sing. He said, yeah, let me take these ice creams back up the hill. And he came back down, and he brought a trumpet with him, but he couldn't play very well. So he started singing with us, and he had a good voice, you know, back in those days because he was young, and we decided to keep him, and he's been with us ever since.
So you guys started, and we won't go because we could go hours and hours on the Macombos, obviously. Yeah. But so you had that initial band starting, and I know that you stayed in that band until maybe later in the 60s, early 70s when you went to the clubs. So in those early years, you guys started getting a name around town and around Illinois and Iowa or whatever. And so like you guys would play for presidential candidates.
Right, we did.
What were some of the big things that you remember? Now, this was the 60s version of the Macombos.
We, like you said, we started getting a name, and one of the things, my dad was a stickler on doing music right. So he wrote out the charts and transcribed them. And then he would rehearse us until we were pretty tight. And he had some good songs. We got some good songs. And eventually, corporate people started calling us, like John Deere, executives of John Deere, the chairman of the board started calling us. And one time he called us to do a thing at his house, and he was having an ambassador of Spain as a guest. And he wanted us to come up play some music. Well, we're not Spaniards, we're Mexicans. So the music was totally different from, culturally. But
Sure.
that was just one of the things that we got called for. We got called for many things, like I know you played with us once when we did the thing for what's that gas company that farmers use out there? They have those white tanks. I forget what it is. But anyway, we did stuff for them, and
Yeah. But we're just talking about the 60s right now. So
yeah,
we're just trying to focus on that
but
era.
I'm saying that's what we played for back then, and we played for a lot of places out of town, like Fort Madison and Depew, and the Fort Madison.
No, that was the 80s.
Fort Madison had a Fort Madison had a fiesta, and the guy Rivas, he knew my dad, so he hired us to come down there and play for the fiesta, and that turned out pretty good. So we got hired to go down there almost every year for their annual Mexican fiesta, and so that turned out pretty well.
And the Macambos, again, even in the 60s, they had a lot of different members, 60s and early 70s, because a trumpet player would leave and another trumpet player would come in, or it'd be Henry or Pete Rangel, and Rudy Colino would come in. Mike Reyes was gone, and Leo Federer came in and played drums. So you guys had lots of different guys, interchanging in those years from, say, 62 to, let's go 70 right now. But the name was already there, being established in the community. And I know there's some funny stories of those real early Macambo days, because, I was 3 or 4, so this is way before I would ever been in the band. So I just wanted you to share a couple of those, primarily the one with Leo Federer. And,
all right.
Again, with you're playing these big corporate gigs, and it's for, if I remember right, this was for the John Deere or something like that.
Yeah, this was for the John Deere executive, chairman of the board, at his home, and we went up there to play for that. And for that, one of the times we went there, and during our breaks, of course, being rich like he was, he always had the best booze. So he'd say, guys, go help yourself with the stuff, during our breaks. So the guys would be like they had no refinement, they would be swilling that booze up left and right. And I didn't know it at the time, but Leo Federer got drunk. And after the gig was over, we all went home. But then the next day, Gonzalo told me, "Hey, did you hear about Leo?" I said, "No, what happened to him?" I thought maybe he had a car accident or something. He said, "Oh, he got drunk at that gig last night, and he fell in the pool. Fell in, I forgot what that guy's name was, chairman of the board of John Deere.
Hewitt?
Yeah, Bill Hewitt. He said he fell in this guy's pool, and Mr. Hewitt had to fish him out and called him a cab to take him home." So that was kind of that's the other side of the Macambos.
And what about fights? I know there was lots of fights back in those days, not in the Macambos, but at the dances. In the dances, there'd be fights going on, and
well, one time we went down to Galesburg, and I don't know what it is about Galesburg, but it seems like we always got in a fight down there. Myself, whenever I drank a lot of booze, I got kind of got feisty, you know. Well, this particular night, I didn't drink that much, you know. We just started, but I had this Gibson 330 that I was playing, and the darn thing wouldn't stay in tune. So I was tuning up before the gig, and then we played a song or two, and I'd have to tune it again. And that happened a couple of times. I had to keep tuning. And this one guy started yelling out there about it, you know. And he kept yelling, and finally we took a break, and the guy was still barking away. And finally I got mad. I put my guitar down, and I started walking towards him to shut him up. And then as soon as he was one table away from my mom, who was sitting out in the audience. As soon as I got close to my mom, she stepped in front of me, said something about no you don't, or go back, or something like that. So all the people got around us, you know, because it's a good thing I didn't make it over there, because the guy was bigger than me. But I didn't care. You know, I just wanted to shut him up.
No.
You know how I got.
So you guys, yeah, oh, I do. So you guys, like I said, if we focused on the Macombos, we could be here for hours, but we want to get kind of your whole quote unquote career. So you were in the Macombos, or the Macombo started around 62, and you stayed with them maybe until 68, 69, somewhere in there. And then you wanted to go off and now play in the nightclubs, from what I understand.
Yeah, I kept getting calls from these people, different people, you know, about playing. I don't know how my name got around, but it did. And finally, it got too inviting for me, and the money was regular, you know, steady. So I told my dad, you know, I want to go play in these clubs, because they're calling me. And so, fortunately, at that time, we met this guy named Rudy Colino, and he was a good singer, and he played a little guitar, you know. He always used to call me the Mago, El Mago. It means the magician, because he thought I was a decent player, you know. And one regret about all of that was I sold him my ES 330 for $150. It's probably worth about $30,000 now, you know. So I regret that. But anyway, after that, I started playing up in the Regal lanes with these guys mentioned earlier. And at that time, the bowling alley lounges were pretty popular, you know, for people to go to at night. Now, we weren't the most popular band, but we were true to our form, and we played, like I say, Otis Redding, guys like that, you know. Now, you corrected me on Booker T, but I know we played Green Onions. I don't know how that went about.
Well, yeah, now when we're to 68, 69, now that's when you're playing with those guys. You weren't playing with those guys in 61, is what that's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, we played stuff by Creedence Clearwater Revival. The guy that was singing for us, he played bass, but he had a good voice, kind of like a horsey type voice, like John Fogerty, you know. And he could sound like Otis Redding and all these guys. So the guys who kind of like that music, they would come up and hear us on Wednesday through Friday, you know. And Fridays, no matter who was playing, that they were just generally crowded. The clubs were. So I played with them for quite a while, and then
now one of the things that I remember. Let me interrupt you here. So you would play there, and then what was the name of the place down in Rock Island on 11th Street? The bowling alley that was down there. Town and Country.
Town and Country, yeah.
But what I know from that, and I know you don't ever talk about this, and just to give people who are listening or whatever, just kind of a background back in those days, because it doesn't happen now necessarily in these days, as far as like the 2000s or anything. But if a band came into town, to a well-known band, you know, popular recording artist or something like that, after they would do their concert, lots of times they would go looking to go to a nightclub, either to sit in and jam, like have a jam session with some local guys or something like that. So you could interact that way. And so I know the stories of, not so much from you telling me, obviously, but from other people telling me that these bands, they would ask who was the best guitar player in town, and whoever they would ask would say Erny Rangel. And then they'd ask, where's he playing at? And so these bands would come, or these members would come to listen to you play at, like you said, at Regal Lanes or wherever, whatever nightclub you were playing at. And so I've been told that some of these bands asked you to go on the road with them to become their guitar player. And I know a couple of them were Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, and then Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild Guys, Magic Carpet Ride. But you didn't go. You stayed to raise me and, you know, stayed home, which I'm grateful for and thankful for. But that's you know, that doesn't happen these days necessarily. I don't know if it's because of social media and phones and stuff, but you don't necessarily get like a big name that comes to town. They, like Paul McCartney did last year, and then he goes out looking to go jam with somebody afterwards. You know, most of the guys, or when Steely Dan came, you know, they just go back to their hotels now. But back in those days, they would go looking out for local guys, just to go around and jam and have jam sessions with. I also remember you telling me the story when I was, well, you know, hearing these stories, that you guys would practice at Regal Lanes, I think on Sunday afternoons, maybe. And when the UT Panthers went to state in 1970 and they had the parade after they came back, you were practicing, and you remember practicing the song Vehicle by the Ides of March.
Right.
You guys were practicing that song while they were having the parade there for the 1970 Panthers, who took second in state that year. So you played with a lot of guys in that scenario then. Now, when did Punch, the group that you had called Punch, when did that become? Did that spin off, or some guys from there, from Regal Lanes or whatever, join another band, or how did that come about?
Well, just to backtrack a little bit, when you're talking about those guys coming from out of town, I was playing with this group called, I can't remember what their name was, but they had a gig at Fargo. And the way that gig happened was, you know, during the break times, everybody goes sit down and socialize. Well, I'd sit by the stage and practice my guitar. And somebody yelled out Malagueña. I hated that, you know, that tune. But then the boss of the band, he came up, hey, you know that song? I said, not really. I mean, it played on a nylon string guitar, classical type. I said, this is electric. They've been asking for it. Can you go do something? So I said, okay. So I went up there, and I started playing chords and little riffs and stuff like that. They were Spanish oriented, you know, and the thing caught on. And so every week they'd ask me to play Malagueña, you know, people would start chanting that. And that's when these people that came from out of town, like Steppenwolf and them, you know, I never talked to them, to be honest with you, but people came up and asked me,
right,
so-and-so wants to know if you'd like to go on the road with him. But I thought about you being little, and I didn't want to leave you, you know. So I said, well, no, I got a boy at home. I got to raise him yet. So that's how that happened. But that wasn't at the Bowling Alley, Rock Island. That was at the Fargo.
Okay.
So then what was the other question?
How did the band Punch because this became the band that did become well known in the Quad Cities.
Yeah.
To where again people talk about how the club that you guys played at would have a line or like around the block
Oh yeah.
waiting to get in to come listen to you guys. And I know it was you and Larry Huntley and George Rankin. Maybe you can name some of the other people that were in the band with you.
There was a young trumpet player. He couldn't have been in his early 20s, just going to school. We called him Doc Mattis because he wanted to be a chiropractor, something like that. There was another guy named Ed Politz, and he played trumpet. And then we had a drummer from Gilsburg called Vince William. He was kind of a jazz-oriented drummer, but we all practiced together. And the way we got that gig was there was somebody else playing down there. Some white guy was playing like Venture stuff, the band Ventures, instrumental stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy was a real piece of cake, you know. He liked the applause and he liked more like a showman, you know. The guy was I don't know, I never liked it.
Okay.
But when he would perform and he'd get done with a gig, he'd have kids come in that carry his equipment to the car, and he wore this cape, you know, and he was kind of he's an okay guy, and he played well, but you know, I just never was into that showman type things. You know, guys would ask me all the time, "Hey, you need to smile more," you know, and I tell them, "I'm not an entertainer. I'm just a guitar player," you know. So anyway, we went down there one night to hear this kid play because Mike knew him, and I don't know if we sat in, but eventually we took his gig away from him. And the band was the nucleus of our band that we had at Regal Lane. And so we didn't have a singer, so to speak. I think the singer came down once with us. And so as it turned out, Bob Butcher happened to be there when we were there. And it was primarily a black club. So I had mentioned to him, I said, we got to find a singer because we're playing all instrumentals. And so he went over to a guy that was in the back that came down to listen. Because like I said, we were playing that soul stuff, you know. And he told that guy, he says, "Hey, see that band up there?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "They're going to need a drummer. Or a vocalist, a singer." So he came up and he talked to the organ player, Julian, and he says, "You guys going to need a singer?" I didn't know this guy from the Man in the Moon. And he said, "Yes." So we told him, "Come down next Friday, and before an hour or so before the gig." And that's all we did is we asked him what songs he knew, and we got the keys from him. And that night we played him, and he sounded good. So from then on, we got a sax player named George Malowick, and he was a real monster. He was still in school.
Monster means good player.
Yeah, he wasn't a monster looking, but he was a good player. And he put all our songs together, made all arrangements, and did all that kind of stuff, you know. And before long, we were playing songs by Chicago, the band Chicago, and people started to hear about us. And I remember somebody telling me, "Hey, you got to go outside before we started. Just take a look at that crowd." And so I went outside, and people were lined up around the block like it was some big show going on, you know. It was just us guys. And it turned out all right. Pretty soon they started having a guy cooking in there, making ribs and soul food and everything else in the back, you know. it was a really good gig, and we did well down there. But the guy,
And again, people don't understand, younger people, and even I wouldn't understand. Those were different days where you would have gigs like that. Like now
oh
you
yeah,
might just play in a bar or a tavern, and this was more not necessarily a supper club or whatever, but that was the norm back in those days, that there'd be different places like that all over the area
yeah,
where you
you
could
could.
go play.
Like I said, when I first started playing at the Blue Horizon, the gig was from Wednesday to Sunday. Now you don't get that, and you get lucky to get a gig without having to have a crowd behind you. A bar venue owners, they want to make money, so they won't hire you until you have so many people following you. It's
Right.
different now. Totally different. Doesn't matter how good you are. It depends on how much money you bring into the venue. So
Yep. Yep.
so back then, we had a good gig going, but I think the owner, he was kind of like in politics, so he kind of didn't run the place very well. So he eventually ran it in the ground. We had to go find a different gig. So the three of us, or four of us, started a little quartet, and we started playing black bars around town. Me and George and Mike and Larry Huntley. We started playing black bars around town. Like back then, there was Curly's and the Shante. I don't know. Uh, what's that place in Davenport we played at? VFW or something like that. But that's the way we kept honing our little craft there, and we got tighter and tighter. I think you went there with us once down at Curly's once, didn't you?
I went to every gig. Again, now you've transferred to the 80s, and I'm still in the late 60s, early 70s,
Well,
because you guys didn't become the Cats until the 80s.
well,
Uh,
to me, it's
I know
all a
it's all
blur.
just runs together. I know.
Yeah.
So I know that, like you said, you guys when you guys were Punch, you guys did Chicago tunes. You guys would do everything like, say, 25 or 64 or Make Me Smile.
Yeah.
And then something like Tony Bennett, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, The Shadow of Your
Yes.
Smile. You guys would do that wide range of
You're
tunes
gonna, you're gonna make me
for the
cry pretty
people.
soon.
So Punch went, like you said, did good. They stopped eventually. And so in the late 70s, and I was there for this moment now. You and I don't know why, what the deal was, but what I remember specifically was it was Memorial Day. It was either the Sunday of Memorial Day or the Monday, the actual Memorial Day, but it was Memorial Day weekend. And we went down to the Munoz's on Hero Street, me and you, for some reason. I don't know why. They were having a party or something there. And they had the garage opened up and with chairs and stuff like that. And Richard Esparza happened to be there. And the Macombos weren't a band anymore by this time. They had stopped playing in the early 70s. A few years after you left them, then they finally dissolved. And Richard was there, and because I remember being there, and Danny Munoz had his black van that he had with his 8-track player, and he had the 8-track of Santana Moonflower. And I still remember this because when you're young like that, those things are all impressionable to you, because I was just kind of just starting maybe to play guitar or something like that, or maybe I hadn't yet. But anyway, you and Richard were sitting there, and as you guys started drinking more throughout the afternoon, you you brought up to Richard, we should get the band back. You know, there's really not a lot of good Mexican bands in town anymore, and we should start up again. And so that was, you know, that was, like I said, the Memorial Day weekend. And I remember in June, which would have just been a few weeks later, you guys had your first practice, and it was at Richard's son's Nando's house on 9th Street in Silvis when he lived there. And it was you, and you guys didn't really have a bass player yet. You were trying different guys out, like Matty Medina and Joe Torres. And then you, Richard, and you guys got Scott Bloomy to play trumpet, because Richard knew the family, the Bloomy family. Yeah. Richard got Dave, no, I'm sorry, that was later. Jesse Lopez to play trumpet. Somehow you guys got him. And then the grandpa was in there. And then Richard worked with a guy that played organ named Steve Dempsey. Mm-hmm. And you guys would practice at Nando's that summer. And then you guys had your first gig like in September. And again, it was for a presidential candidate. And Albert was playing drums. I forgot about Albert. Albert was playing drums. And that was the start then of kind of like the second phase of the Macombos.
Second edition.
Yeah, of when you guys started doing it again. But those were the guys that were there that started that. And then like a year later, you had to let Matty Medina go. And so then Phil Bonella came in. I came in a little bit after that. Albert was gone and Z-Bop came in. Scott Bloomy left for college or whatever and brought in Dave Maccabee.
I think Daniel played in there.
Again, that's way later. He didn't come until the 90s after I was gone.
No more than I do.
So, so that second phase of the Macombos, you know, we won't go into all that, but that's kind of what kept you going in the 80s playing. But at the same time, on Sundays, you would have George Rankin and the Cats. Mm-hmm. And like you said, that's where I would go to Curly's with you, and the Ashanti and the Camel's Nest and those places in Davenport. And just for myself, what I remember about that is I'd never seen women scream for a singer. And I still haven't to this day.
Yeah.
The way they would sing a scream for George Rankin. I mean, it wasn't like Elvis in the sense, but because it was a different type of scream, but yeah. He sang so well with so much emotion that it brought the stuff out of everybody to where I just remember sitting there with my jam box recording you guys, and everybody's just going crazy in the place.
Yeah.
Because of the energy that's coming from just three musicians and George's voice. And I mean, it was just quite something to see. And like I said, I've still never seen a local singer have that type of effect on a crowd the way I used to see that happen with George all the time.
Yeah, I know that the Cats that played behind George, we always had this term called the cat feel or the cat groove, you know, because they had a lot of energy. I remember one time we played up at what's this place in Rock Island? Used to be up there, Lee's. And this other guitar player was there. He says, I saw you. I saw you there. I was hiding, but I saw you there. And then my buddy Vince, they used to work with me. He said he was sitting in the front row. He said, I could just feel that energy coming out of that band, you know, when we played there. Because when George was singing, you know, we just had to follow him, and he had a lot of energy. So it transcribed to the band, you know, kind of made the band groove. It was a good time.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you to tell the story of this goes back to the Punch days when George was singing and when he had that leather jacket and what fell out of his jacket.
Well, what happened was before a gig, back in the 70s, you know, people used to wear these fringe leather jackets, you know, I don't know where they got it from. Kind of like I got one of them now, but anyway, George and I were getting ready for the gig, and George was taking off his jacket, and something fell on the stage, made a big noise, plop, And I said, "What's that?" And he picks it up. "Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't supposed to fall out. It was like a gun." I said, "Is that thing loaded?" Said, "Yeah, it's loaded." So I'm glad it didn't go off. Guy gonna get shot. But he carried this gun with him. I said, "Why you got that?" He said, "Well, I never know when I'm gonna need it." So he was always packing whenever we did a gig.
Yeah, George was a funny guy. If anybody ever knew his sense of humor, you and him always, even to this day, like we called him just a couple months ago in the pandemic, and it's just hilarious. He calls you a crotchety old man and things like that, and he has a good sense of humor and stuff like that, and he's fun to be around. And but yeah, that voice of his and that energy that would come off of you guys. I mean, those were some good times for me because they helped shape me to see what it was like. Made me want to play music. I was already playing by this time, like I said, in the Macombos and Belmex, but it made me even want to play more. And then when I got older and in that environment, I was okay with it because I'd been around it, on that scene from being a young teenager. And George was my truant officer for school. And so I couldn't tell kids what was going on Sunday nights with George, what I would see, because he was the truant officer on at school on Mondays. And so you always told me, now keep quiet about what you saw, and stuff like that. And so I could never say anything. Another thing, so you had the Macombos in the 80s, you had George Rankin and the Cats, and then you also played with the Quad City Jazz Ensemble, which was led by Dave Holcomb.
Right.
So go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
Well, as I've said before, I always wanted to learn more and more and more, and I always studied more. But again, it was an experience that I was kind of naive about. I saw this article in the paper about this band starting up, and it said in the article that if anybody was interested and like to be a participant, to call this number. So I thought about it for a while. I said, well, okay. I was thinking it was just like a band I've been playing in, rock or blues and stuff like that. But it was a full orchestra, 18 pieces. So I called the guy. He says, "Oh, yeah, you can come down and rehearse with us." And they rehearsed on Sunday. So I went to rehearsal. And the thing I remember about that first rehearsal was he had all the charts laying down there. And so unlike other bands that we practice, these guys here, they'd go through the song just once. And you either got it or you didn't. And fortunately, the chords that were on the charts were nothing that I wasn't already familiar with. I just had to keep my time and take the breaks when the breaks came and things like that. But one particular thing I do remember that I'm thankful for my dad was, hold on a second. My throat's getting sore like my hoarse like my dad's. One thing I remember was we were doing a song called Los Altibajos. I remember that. And the song was going fine, and all of a sudden the director stopped it, and everybody stopped. And there was a notation on the chart, said Montuno. And he looked around at the band and says, "Anybody know what Montuno means?" Of course, I did, So he looked around, and finally his eyes came over to me. He said, "You know what that means?" He says, "Yeah." So I started playing the Montuno, and everybody just fell right in, So I kind of felt good about that. Then we took a break, and Jack, what was his name? Jack Scott.
Mm-hmm.
He was out in the hallway.
Yeah.
And he says to me, he says, "Hey, man, pretty good, man, pretty good." That's kind of encouraging, but it was really an eye opener because for me, I was used to playing in combos, where we practiced a song 10 times before we got it right. But these guys here, they were all school teachers, music teachers, and professionals already, and they could sight read all these charts just by like reading a book, So reading notation, I was really behind compared to them guys. Reading chords, I was doing. I did fine. So at the end of the rehearsal, the guy asked me, he said, "Well, what do you think? You think you'd like to do something like this?" I said, "Yeah, if you can have me." So he gave me the time for the next rehearsal. Now I was there.
And that was Dave Holcomb, correct?
That's correct. And I was with them until the funding ran out. They couldn't get any more funding from the government or something.
Yeah, I remember going again. Phil and I went with you down to the Rutabaga Jazz Festival in Galesburg.
Oh yeah.
And you played with Buddy DeFranco, and that's where you guys did Los Altibajos.
Oh yeah.
I also remember Butch Miles, who was the drummer for the Count Basie Orchestra.
Yeah.
You guys playing there with him. And the main guys I remember were Dave Holcomb, Jack Scott, Gino Ciccatelli, which was, again, for me, incredible because maybe like 10 years later, I'd be doing gigs with all those guys. Yeah. And they would ask me, "Are you Erny Rangel's son?" or something like that. And I'd say, "Yeah," and so I got to play with all those guys that were in that band on my own,
Probably played better than I did.
I don't know. Well, I was playing bass, that was back in my bass days of doing all the gigs on bass. So in the 80s, that's what you were primarily doing was the Macombos, George Rankin and the Cats, and the Quad City Jazz Ensemble. And now in the 80s, also, I want to get back to this with some remaining time here, is when the Macombos started up again. They had the name, obviously, and whoever would know about them from the 60s and early 70s. But around, and this is what I remember, around 84, 85, and like I said, certain guys had left because of school or whatever, and Dave Navarro came back into the band. Phil had left to go with Fiesta, so I switched over to bass, and Steve was still there. But the thing that I really remember is around 85, 86, it just took off to where we were gigging like
every week.
It was every week for sure, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, which was not heard of, again, for a band like that. Like, we weren't doing nightclubs or anything like that, but we'd be booked sometimes a year or 2 years in advance. And nobody knows this, that, whoever's, if there's anybody watching or whatever, but anybody that was in the band, and this is kind of crazy when you think about it, we never took a vacation, like a summer vacation with your family.
Yeah.
Because we had to play every weekend. So if you took off, you might take off like a Tuesday through Thursday with your family or something like that. But you were never, all through that whole decade of the 80s, nobody ever took a vacation, or nobody ever thought of, back in those days, hey, let's not book any gigs for 2 weeks in July or 2 weeks in June or whatever, just to have some time off. Nobody thought of it that way because the gigs would come in so fast, and it's incredible when you think about the Macombos from the 60s, all the way up until when they finally stopped. But, they played for people and then played for those people's kids and then their grandkids and their great grandkids, generation after generation after generation. And then we always, would joke around about all the type of gigs we would get, because we do like baptisms, and then we'd play funerals or whatever. And you came up with that
from
line.
From the womb to the tomb.
Yep, from the womb to the tomb. The Macombos will provide all your musical needs. And so, I mean, it just really took off there in the 80s to where, you know, it kept going for a while. And then I left and Paulie Palos came in and eventually you left and Kevin left, or, you know, Kevin came in, and that's when Daniel was around. Willie Camarillo came in here and there. But kind of like for the next, you know, let's say the 90s, I know you were still in there, but maybe around by the 2000s, you still get together with George Rankin and the Cats, basically, is your primary thing, your primary thing of how you go out and just relax and have fun, because you're not anymore, you're not at it like trying to get gigs or things like that. It's more about just having fun. And
Right.
and again, because it's a whole different scene, and so it's fun when you guys still get together. I mean, obviously not through the pandemic, but you know, you guys have still been doing a few gigs here and there, maybe one or two, and that's what we did with the Macombos for about 5 years there, 5 or 6 years, where we just play in the summertime and make sure it was on our time schedule. You know, can't play past 10 or 11 o'clock because Macombos can't see at night anymore when it comes to driving and things like that. And so, you know, it's just been fun that way, where you're not trying to play all the time. And for anyone who does, obviously they don't see you at home like I do, but you still practice at home. You're still learning the guitar. And that's always been a thing like you or me or Manuel Lopez always talk about. I mean, we love sports, but you know, you get to a certain age and you can't be what you used to be athletically. But with
That's
music,
right.
you can still keep it up, and you're still learning things even into your 80s. You can still keep learning things because with music, you know, you never know it all. And so I know that you're still at home, still practicing and figuring things out, and that's a beautiful thing about playing music.
Yeah.
As we get ready to close up, the other thing too is, and I think I said this at the end of our first interview, is just, to me, it's kind of incredible. And I know, again, you don't know all this or you don't think about it, but, and especially with Mexican guitar players, all the guitar players you influenced, you know, of guys who have told me, oh man, I saw your dad playing at the Fiesta or somewhere, and that made me want to play the guitar, you know, and all these guys, you know, a whole list of them, you know, we won't go through all the names, but, you know, if there's basically a Mexican guitar player in the Quad Cities, somehow you influenced them from when they were younger, and they saw you as little kids and stuff like that. And even from out of town, I remember getting a message from some guy in Sterling and Galesburg and stuff like that. Is like, is your
Remember
dad
that?
Ernie Rangel? Oh, I saw him.
Remember that guy in Depew that we went to play at? The last time we were at Peru or Depew before we
Oh
started.
yeah, 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 yeah. Mm-hmm.
He said he heard me playing before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been quite the ride, I guess, musically. You know, you've got to play a lot of different styles, a lot of different
Yeah.
songs, interact with a lot of different musicians, and then uh, you know, you've influenced people musically, and so it's been I guess you could, in one sense, you could say a full life musically. You know, of all the experiences and things like that. Of course, we never feel like it's enough. We always want to do more. And then
Well,
when the age hits, you know, you think, oh man.
what I'm most proud of is that the Macambos, as the old saying goes, they were often imitated but never duplicated. You know, and there's been so many Mexican bands through the years since Macambos started, but they're no longer playing. The other thing that I'm proud of is, say we started in '61, today's 2001 or 2000. That's over 50, 60 years now. They were until you came along and we got too old, to play.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm thankful for you because you encouraged me, even though I chopped off this finger, And you encouraged me that night in the hospital. I'm still able to play now with 3 fingers. You know.
Yeah, you've been playing the guitar with only 3 fingers for like the last 10 years.
Isn't that
Wasn't
long?
that 2010 when it got chopped off?
Something like that.
Yeah. So it's been 10 years that, yeah, I still remember that night.
Yeah, thing about it is,
So,
I still have a quest or a desire to learn music. You know. Right now, I'm
yeah,
taking the little lesson now and then from Gino Ciccatelli on time, reading time notation, keeping on time, stuff like that. So I'm practicing. I still practice my scales and my, you know, I'm trying to learn different types of songs. You know, just to keep my mind active.
yep, yeah. Well, I guess it's been an hour, so we'll stop there, Dad. And
Yeah, because
thanks
I
for
got
being a guest on my music stories with Troy.
yeah, because being old, I gotta go pee.
All righty. Famous
All
last
right.
words.
All right.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll come up with
Bye.
somebody else in a few weeks.